So we've been doing these webinars since the start of COVID, really. We used to run an event every couple of months, and now we run a webinar pretty much every month. A lot easier than running events. We just obviously open our laptops and we can turn up and then get back to our work afterwards. And as long as you all keep coming, we'll keep running them. We try and find topics that are useful to our audience of predominantly digital creative agency owners. Thank you, Mike. The link's in there, anyone, if you want to forward that on. And there has been some changes to R&D tax credits recently, and I wanted to make sure that we focus on those developments and some of maybe more advanced areas, so things that might be new or might be uncertain to you. The reality is most people on this webinar are already, tired of hearing about introductions to R&D, so we're not doing yet another R&D introduction today. We're covering the latest updates and legislation and some practical advice on how you can be ready all year round. So we still meet clients on a weekly basis. Speaking to a potential new client yesterday, he had been made aware of R&D actually, but told that he probably wouldn't qualify. And I said, look, it doesn't cost anything to have a conversation with Forrest Brown. They'll be able to give you an idea within half an hour, an hour's time, whether there might be an opportunity. So there's very little to lose other than half an hour of your time. But from what you've said, the probably actually is a really good case for R&D. But the benefit of working with the experts like Forrest Brown this is a very specialist area. I have a whole team of people that have different levels of expertise. They work very close with HMRC. So number one, you're going to get your claim maximised as much as is allowable, but number two, your claim is going to be watertight for any future investigation, so you're in good hands if you work with Forrest Brown. So whilst MAP, as your finance partners will execute the claim, Forrest Brown are our partners that do all the hard work, making sure that your projects are understood and that claim is robust. So we're going to start with Forrest Brown today. Felicity and Ben, delighted could join us. We're going to have about 20 minutes for them to present, and then Q&A at the end of that. So please do fire a couple of questions in, even if it's just to humour me, so that I've not got the red face of having no questions for our guys at the end. There are no stupid questions. I like stupid questions because they're the easier ones to answer. And then we're going to have Matt Smith coming on after that, and then same routines, 20 minutes of Matt and then 5 minutes Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Felicity and Ben, and once I can see everything's working, I will hide my video.
Great morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with a brief introduction to Forrest Brown, to myself and Ben, and then we'll get on with the exciting stuff. So Forrest Brown, who are we? Well, we are, as Paul has said, we're the UK's largest R&D tax specialists. We are made up of chartered tax advisors, sector specialists. We have a couple of ex-HMRC inspectors, and we specialise purely in R&D tax credits. It's all we do. It's something we're really passionate about, and we are delighted to be here today to share some thoughts with you. So brief introduction on myself. I'm Felicity McCready. I am a tax lawyer. I spent the best part of 10 years practicing in international tax and trusts, and a couple of years ago I joined Forrest Brown, and I now work very closely with our accountant partners, making sure that research and development is brought proactively to clients. Ben, do you want to give a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my name's Ben. I'm a chartered tax advisor. I've been at Forrest Brown for about 7 years now in a pure R&D role with a focus on digital agencies. My background for that was personal tax.
So Paul's already touched on it, so we won't labour this, but we're going to start by running you through key recent developments, and then we're going to move on to practical tips and record keeping. So Ben, let me hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So yeah, we'll start by talking about the PAYE NIC cap and how this could impact your company, your R&D claim. It's something it's been in the news a bit. It's something you guys might be aware of already, but something that can have a big impact. I thought it'd be worth talking about some of the key points in relation to it. So this was introduced by the 2021 budget, and it was introduced to try and prevent abuse of the SME R&D tax scheme. Been a few high-profile R&D fraud cases over recent years, which is probably the catalyst for this coming in. As a result of this cap, the maximum tax credit that a company can now receive is £20,000 plus times its PAYE NIC liabilities. So it's probably likely to be relevant to your company if you have a smaller team of permanent staff and instead use a lot of subcontractor resource. The actual commencement date of this is the start of the company's first accounting period, beginning on or after the 1st of April 2021. So for example, if your company has a December year end, the first accounting period which the cap applies, it begins on the 1st of January 2022 and ends on the 31st of December 2022. It's actually due to come into effect earlier. I don't know if you might have seen it in the press, but it was actually delayed as a result of COVID. There is a potential exemption. So companies are exempt from the cap if two conditions are met. One of them is that the UK employees and directors are preparing to create or actively managing intellectual property. The second condition is that the company's connected party subcontractors and externally provided workers account for less than 15% of their total R&D spend. One thing that the budget also brought in was that the definition of intellectual property was extended to include know-how, which was a very positive update, as lots of businesses carrying out R&D without the actual commercial need to formally protect the IP through patents, copyrights, design rights, etc. You might also be aware, the 2021 budget also introduced some other kind of notable corporation tax measures, including the capital allowances, super deduction, and also the enhanced loss carryback facility, which can have an impact on the mechanics of an R&D claim. So the enhanced loss carryback facility means that trading losses incurred between the 1st of April 2020 and the 31st of March 2021 can be offset against profits in the previous 3 years rather than just 1 year, as was previously the case. So, what we expect from this is that fewer companies are probably going to opt to exchange their trading losses for an R&D tax credit and use this new enhanced carryback option instead. And the reason for this is that there's a higher rate of relief by offsetting against profits rather than surrendering for an R&D tax credit. So it's not just going to be an automatic offset here. It's going to be worth looking at profits in early years and see if you can use that new facility. So now we're going to go on to talk briefly about COVID-19 funding measures and their interaction with R&D tax credits. Loads and loads of businesses, have used the government's job retention scheme, also known as the furlough scheme, and also received other grants and loans, such as like the COVID business interruption loans, bounce back loans, recovery loan scheme. There's obviously been a really challenging time for businesses, and this government support has been really valuable in lots of cases. With regard to the furlough scheme, an R&D claim cannot include the sums paid to employees while furloughed, as employees were not allowed to carry out work for the business, so by design could not have been carrying out any R&D. As staff costs, in most cases account for the largest part of most R&D claims, it's expected that many of the claims in this kind of COVID affected period are likely to be smaller in value, where companies use the furlough scheme, unfortunately. Receipt of other COVID-19 grants and loans can also have a substantial impact on your R&D claim. And the reason for this is that to be eligible for SME relief, R&D expenditure must not have been subsidised. The rules in relation to COVID funding are actually in line with the rules relating to the receipt of other innovation grants, which you guys may already be familiar with if you've submitted a number of R&D claims and received innovation funding. And the actual impact depends on whether the COVID-19 funding is classified as a notified state aid. Some grants and loans are, for example, the COVID business interruption loans, for example, whereas others, such as the small business grant funds, are not. It's probably beyond the scope of this presentation. There's loads and loads of different funding options, and the rules on this can be complex. There's some good articles on our website with more detail, plus also, we're always happy at Forrest Brown to discuss, but it's definitely worthwhile to be aware of this. If you do your own claims, don't just disregard the fact that you've received funding, and because it does have an impact. So a further update is something that's also very recent, and this relates to subsidised RD, like a new HMRC interpretation. So this is a recent change in approach from HMRC, and it's really important to be aware of if your business develops products and services with a customer in mind. It's something that's we've probably seen since late 2019, and hopefully none of you listening to this webinar have been unlucky enough to have a HMRC inquiry on this issue. HMRC, they're actually challenging a number of SME R&D claims for customer-led R&D on the basis that this R&D is subsidised by their customers. They're essentially interpreting sections of the R&D legislation in a different way to how they previously interpreted them. Go back to basics on this. So I guess to be eligible for SME relief, R&D expenditure must not have been subsidised. HMRC asserted that in cases where the expenditure has been subsidised, costs should be claimed under the less generous RDR R&D scheme. So as an example, if a company secures a contract for a retailer to supply a product that it then successfully develops, because R&D took place to fulfill a contract, HMRC considers that the company's R&D expenditure in this product has been subsidised by that retailer. Alternatively, if a company decides to start to sell to customers on its own account, then SME relief should be available. These new rules, or this new interpretation, could in theory apply to a digital agency preparing a new platform or an application for a client. HMRC would be making this argument that it's subsidised expenditure, which we disagree with. We're aware that HMRC is currently in the process of updating its published guidance on subsidised R&D expenditure, and once this guidance is live, all companies making SME R&D relief schemes will need to kind of reconsider their filing position. We as part of there was a recent consultation on R&D tax credits, and Forrest Brown put together a response, and we engaged widely with a number of other R&D providers, firms of accountants, and it's clear that there's a fundamental disagreement with HMRC on this interpretation of the legislation. There is a really good article written by our technical director, Jenny Tragner, on our website, which gives a bit more detail on this, and it's something that's really worth being aware of, because it's a recent development that goes against years of previous kind of interpretations from HMRC. So over to you, Felicity. I think you've got some.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick up now and give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of thoughts on, or practical tips really on record keeping. So firstly, from your perspective, what's the legal requirement? What do you need to do? Well, there's no specific record keeping requirement for R&D tax credits. However, as with all entries on your CT return, there is the general requirement that you keep sufficient records to support your entries. You may all remember that when you first do a claim, HMRC does consider that first-time claimants aren't going to be likely to have detailed contemporaneous records to support all of their R&D work. But this attitude does change as time goes on, and year on year there is an expectation from HMRC that you will proactively review, identify and implement processes which are going to produce records that will support your claim. So it's certainly something that you need to be aware of. Now, if there's not a legal requirement, why are you going to be bothered thinking too much about this? Well, the answer is it's going to dramatically improve your claim. So it's going to increase its robustness and also its value. So here we're talking about maximising your innovation funding, and we're also talking about minimising the chance of having a challenge from HMRC. The other thing that isn't to be underestimated is that good record keeping throughout the year, having those really good systems and processes in place, is going to make the process as efficient and commercial for you as possible. And we know from experience that that's something that clients really value, because of course you've got a business that's got a lot to be doing, and whilst R&D is very important, obviously the more streamlined that process can be, the better for you and for the business. So what records are needed, and what are our tips for best practice? Well, I think the first thing I wanted to say here was really that, there is no one size fits all. Each business is different. The method and the level of record keeping is absolutely going to depend on your business and its needs. By way of an example, HMRC do prefer the use of timesheets, time recording, but that's absolutely not practical and commercial for a lot of companies. And actually, this is a good point to mention that I think there's real value, and I think this is really fundamental to record keeping and having sort of an ongoing relationship, is that it's very important that you've got a provider who has if you're working with a provider, not doing it yourself, who has a really good understanding of your business. If they know your business inside out, they're going to be able to make sure that you've got the best processes in place for you, for your business, in order to make things really efficient, and get those good records in place. We at Forrest Brown tend to work very closely with our accounting partners, obviously, who we are delighted to work with, and I think that this really feeds into that process of having sharing of information, really knowing your clients, having those good relationships with the relevant people, that ensures that things can be as efficient as they can be. So you should certainly be looking for that in a provider. Right, let's touch on some of the topics that you're going to be seeking to have records in. So we'll start with projects. Now, actually, with all of the records, I think what you're looking for is real-time documentary evidence wherever you can. In terms of projects, we would really encourage you to list everything. That's even if you don't think that a project is necessarily undertaking any R&D. The reason we say this is really because we can sometimes spot things that you might not think are particularly obvious, and there's more subtle R&D that can sit in things. If we've got that full list, we can just have a brief conversation and run through things and make sure that nothing's missed. Again, it just comes back to maximising the value of your claim. Now, in terms of how you keep those records for the projects, the answer is different for every business. Time recording is great if you have it in practice and if it works. Otherwise, potentially, kick-off meeting at the start of each project. It could be a quarterly R&D meeting where the relevant people get together and review things, look at which staff are involved, what's going on, and keep those records. Equally, do you have a regular senior management meeting when it would make sense to add R&D to the agenda? So that's your general project list. Then we've got R&D projects. So obviously this is where you need pulling together your more detailed records. Now, I would say a really good process to have in place here would be at the outset. You want to be capturing, what are the advances that are being sought and what are the uncertainties that you think are being faced. Have that thought at the beginning, pull those records together. It's obviously something that you need to be consistently reviewing as the project goes on and keeping up to date. But certainly make sure that you're setting out time to have these, to pull these thoughts together, to get these records in place. I think this is a good moment to touch on who we want to be having these thoughts and pulling these lists together. And really, it does come to competent professionals. These are the people that we know from HMRC, they want to be closely involved. There was a case in 2005 where HMRC explicitly said that this is their expectation. So again, this will look different for every business. It might be that, you know, the FD, the MD is the relevant person and does need to be doing it all. But who are your competent professionals? You know, who's the competent professional within each project? If you've got a bigger business, if you've got a lot of projects going on, it's a really good opportunity to delegate out, get the relevant people in place to be doing the record keeping. That's going to be keeping HMRC happy, which in turn will be making your claim as robust as it can be. And it's also going to make the process more efficient for those, for example, your MD or your FD, whoever's sort of project managing the claim. And sometimes they feel that they need to be involved in everything and talking through all the projects. But actually, I think to make things as efficient as possible, identifying the relevant individuals, making sure that they have the education and awareness to know what needs to be recorded, what are you looking for, and delegate and have that ongoing involvement. Staff costs are crucial. They're often a really significant element of a claim. Here I would say, you know, work with your provider, work with your accountant. How do you usually record things, and figure out a system that's going to work best and make the most sense for your business. Consumables, you know, your material used up or are transformed in the R&D process, your heat and light and power too. It's really worth having accurate records here as well. You know, for example, if you're working on a big project, for example, sometimes purchasing materials at the beginning when you're purchasing smaller amounts can mean that the costs are significantly higher than they are later on where you're purchasing larger amounts. If you've got accurate records, if you can, you know, ring fence these costs, if you've got the evidence there, then it means that you can pull them through into the R&D claim and you can confidently put those higher costs in. So it really is useful to invest that time sort of early on. Subcontractors, Ben's spoken about them, and externally provided workers. You know, a lot of companies will bring outside expertise in when they are working on an R&D claim, or sorry, when they're working on R&D. Now, I think a top tip here would be work with your accountant, have conversations about how you can record each classification of worker in a separate ledger or in a way that's going to make sense and feed through to the claim. Avoids that tiny exercise of looking back retrospectively and trying to figure things out and put things in the right place. Again, you know, it's going to reduce your chance of an inquiry. So my end note, I can see I'm coming up to my 20 minutes. I think my key takeaways would be just sort of highlighting really the importance and the value of investing some time and energy into putting into place the right record keeping processes for the business. You know, work really closely with your provider, work with your accountant, make sure that they really understand you and your business and work together. And then hopefully, you know, you can reap the rewards of having a maximised claim, and also one that is, you know, as robust as it can be. And also from your perspective, you know, it's going to be efficient and commercial for the business. Right, and there we go. We're at 20 minutes and I think I'm done, Paul.
Well done, Felicity. Very well done. Great timekeeping. So I'm just going to cover a couple of the key points just to sort of reinforce them and try and, you know, tell people for the second time as succinctly as I can. So a few things that I jumped out to me, and feel free if I miss anything, Felicity and Ben, to add those in or correct me if I get anything wrong. So there's now a cap on R&D claims. In the past, there has been caps relating to your PAYE bill. Now, this is not as strict as that because it's actually 3 times your PAYE bill. So the logic in the past with HMRC said, we ain't going to give you tax relief for tax that you've not already paid in the past. So that tax is your PAYE tax. But now they're saying, as long as your claim is less than 3 times your PAYE bill, plus an extra 20,000 on top of that, we're going to let you claim up to that amount. So that's the new restriction, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Now there are some caveats to that in terms of if you're producing IP, or if you've got subcontractor costs that are less than 15% of your overall claim. So, you know, there's more to it, but you don't need to over worry about a lot of that stuff, because that's what Forrest Brown and MAP have the processes in place to make sure that those things are considered when we do your claim. But the reason we wanted to present this today is because, you know, it may affect some of the decisions that you're making in the business day to day, both commercially and sort of practically how you're doing your timekeeping as well. The loss relief, I think, is a big one, and that's been introduced by the government as a result of the pandemic. they are conscious that many businesses and recognise that many businesses will have lost money during COVID. And when we produce your accounts, if the business has made a loss, or more specifically a taxable loss, which is slightly different from your accounting loss, then typically you would roll that loss forward against future profits. If you're making an R&D claim, there's an opportunity to get a repayment of tax in the year. But as Ben said, that would be at a slightly lower rate of corporation tax. Corporation tax at 19%. You'd only be able to claim 14.5% of your loss because of R&D. Whereas if you carry forward, you can claim 20%. 19%, sorry, is the corporation tax at the moment. So you can claim 19% relief in the future. Now the problem with that is, how do we know if we're going to make money next year or the year after? How long is it going to take to get that money back and get that benefit back? The beauty of this new relief is that you can now carry that loss back, so you can carry it back to previous years where you've made profit, and that means you can get the relief now. So Forrest Brown will always look at your claim, and Matt will look at your claim and have a commercial conversation with you, which is like, which of the options do we want to explore? Do we want money in the bank now? Do we want to carry it forward? Do we want to carry it back? And looking at the most fruitful benefit, the way of using your benefit. The CBILS one is something I like to just touch on for another minute or two, Ben, if that's okay, because I think this is one that's causing a lot of people concern and confusion. I say CBILS, there's other ways that you might have been, you might have funded your business during the pandemic. So the bounce back loan, recovery loan scheme that's coming in, they fall under what's known as state aid. And R&D credits are also known as state aid. And what HMRC are making sure is just that you're not claiming for the same thing twice, effectively. So if you've invested in an R&D project and you've used CBILS money to fund that, and now you're trying to claim R&D relief on that same money, HMRC are looking for to make sure that doesn't happen effectively. But that's not to say because you've had CBILS you can't claim R&D. We need to help to show HMRC if it's appropriate and if it's credible that the CBILS money has been brought in for one thing, which could be savings, working capital, etc., and the R&D investment is separate from, is a separate exercise from those CBILS funds. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's worth definitely like ring fencing the COVID funding, probably keeping it separate from some of the R&D project spend, which you have a better chance of arguing to HMRC that this has got nothing to do with the R&D project. It's, the R&D project's not been subsidised.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't receive this type of funding doesn't mean that you won't be able to claim R&D. It's just like off.
Yeah.
And I think if I could add, I think there's there are opportunities for some pre-planning, and I think perhaps that's one example where you shouldn't be afraid, before jumping in with something, reach out to your advisors, have those conversations, figure out if there's a sensible way to do things, and that's what they're there for.
Yeah, and that could be something as simple as minuting in your board meetings that we've set this CBILS money aside, and these investments in these R&D areas are happening in isolation of that CBILS money. We're not using that for this purpose. So any concerns, any uncertainty about that, just reach out and let us know. Customer-led R&D, I think this is another one of those headline-grabbing areas that could cause a lot of anxiety. So there's a lot of people going to be jumping and shouting about, surely this doesn't, because for digital agencies, the majority of the R&D that you're claiming is for Matt aside, who's going to talk soon about products that he's built for his own agency, but often you're building products for your customers. And this could be quite a frightening headline because it suggests that that's no longer going to be eligible for R&D credits. That's not what we're saying at all. It might just be a lower rate. There's another scheme for larger businesses and you might fall into that rate, which is not as fruitful, but still massively worthwhile. And that's only if Forrest Brown and don't manage to encourage HMRC to sort themselves out and stop playing silly games. So again, one of the benefits of Forrest Brown is that they're lobbying HMRC and they're fighting for you as the SMEs to try and get the most favourable tax benefits possible. Because at the end of the day, this scheme was introduced to help businesses like you, encourage you to continue to innovate and stimulate our economy. One other thing I just wanted to touch on, although I said we won't talk about the basics, I wonder if there's some people on here just wondering, do they still struggle to understand what sort of the definition of R&D activity is? And the reason it applies to many agencies is because HMRC are looking for two things: advances in technology or advances in science. And many of you are creating advances in technology. And one of the criteria that one of the things they're looking for is that you are delivering something that has an element of uncertainty. And many of you have something called a discovery phase or something similar to that, where you're helping the client to define the brief, because the client doesn't know the exact brief. They don't know what technology they need to use. They don't know how to make work the thing that they want to work. They know what they want the solution to be, but they might not necessarily know how to get there. Now, if you're having to help them to work out what technology you need and how you're going to deliver that solution before you then go and deliver it, then that highly screams alarm bells of this feels like an R&D activity. So the nature of a lot of the work that you're doing by definition is acting in that uncertain area where you are innovating and you're having to create the brief and find the answers. They can't just go and buy a product off the shelf that they can stick in their business and it works. And that's why, if you're a digital agency, it's absolutely worth the conversation to explore this.
Yeah, I would say on that, Paul, that any project where a proof of concept has to be developed on the early stages, or some kind of early prototype to show that this is actually going to be possible, that's a great sign of uncertainty, because in the early stages you're not sure if something's even possible, and you do a proof of concept or a prototype to kind of prove that the basics or the fundamentals of the project can happen. So I think it's actually referred to in the HMRC guidelines of a qualified R&D project. Prototyping is always a good sign of an R&D project.
Which many digital projects are, aren't they? Even if the engineers and developers think, oh, no problem, we'll find out a solution, they're using their expertise to go and find that solution that's not readily available.
Absolutely. It's interesting how frequently we speak to people who are real experts in their field, who do a lot of innovation and say, oh, but no, this is just my day job. No, this is just what I do. Just because you're highly competent and you're used to approaching these challenges and finding a way doesn't mean it's not R&D. It's always worth having.
Yeah, and as I say, worst case scenario is 30 minutes to an hour of your time, probably, to do that initial diagnostic. Is that fair? To identify whether it's worth carrying on a conversation. Yeah, that's right. It's always worth having a conversation, because I think to be fair, the guidelines of what is R&D, what isn't, it can be great to someone that's not familiar with it, because the guidelines themselves are drawn up for all different types of businesses, not just digital, but construction or engineering. So they're deliberately fairly broadly drawn. So for that reason, I guess at Forrest Brown, we submit thousands of claims a year, so we know what HMRC like, what they don't like, what fits in with guidelines, what doesn't. So it's always worth a conversation. Yeah. So any questions on this, anybody, then feel free to send them over to us. And if it's highly technical and we need extra support, then we'll get Forrest Brown involved on that as well. But as we've said, I know it's easy to say, but genuinely every case is unique. And it's about finding a way, trying to find an opportunity for R&D where it's credible, where it's right to do so. Great. Okay, guys, are you okay to hang on to the end just in case anyone has any questions later?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Matt, if you want to switch your camera on. And thank you very much. Wonderful. Hello, Matt.
Hi, well, good morning, everybody.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'll switch off, Matt. Your screen is up and running, so everything looks good. I'll just leave you to it.
Sure, fantastic. Thanks, Paul. So morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. And what I'm walking you through, I guess, is a new product product-based business we've developed that we spun out during the pandemic out of our existing agency, BDB, which is an international B2B agency, which I took through a management buyout in 2017 and have taken it through to full employee ownership in February of this year. But today's presentation is focusing on virtual visitor. So not only a new business we've set up, but a new SaaS-based product business as well. So very relevant to the R&D tax claim conversation. So a little bit of background, I guess, to the story of virtual visitor and how it came about involves taking a step back in time towards really the start of 2020. So a time of pre-pandemic, the glory years, and before our kind of eyes had been violated by Matt Hancock's recent video. So times were good, and BDB operated heavily in the events and exhibitions space. So everything from building, design, graphics, digital integration, support on the day with editors, and press liaison. And it was a core part and growing part of BDB's business as an integrated agency. Now, we were already looking at introducing innovative ways to showcase exhibition designs in more detail beyond what would be a classic kind of sketch or flat render. So we were looking at 3D tours and visual and virtual reality, how you could bring exhibition stands to life. And we'd also been we'd been practicing what we preach and taking on more of an account-based marketing approach of who we wanted to work with. And we'd spent the last 4 years from 2016 through to January 2020 courting a particular large client, and finally had the success in February. So on the 3rd of February 2020, we finally got the nod that we'd picked up this key account that we were looking to convert. And to put that in context for the fellow agency owners on the call, it was a €9 million contract. And to put it in further context, BDB turns over about £6 million. So for us, it was a game-changing contract win. Big celebrations here at the agency after we'd spent such a long time courting them, being at every event they'd been at, and trying to position ourselves as a thought leader in their space. We don't need to go into too much detail about what came next, but obviously, the global lockdown severely impacted the events and exhibition space. I think it's fair to say a complete decimation of that space overnight. So from the 2nd of February, winning a €9 million contract through to the lockdown commencing around the 23rd of March in the UK. But our clients work on the international global stage as well. So their entire portfolio of events disappeared overnight. So like any good agency owner, what do you do when the world's on fire? I turn to coffee. And if anybody knows it, went to the Two Brothers coffee house in Altrincham and sent an email to the team that I had an idea that ultimately I wanted to try and create a platform or a solution or a product where we could create bespoke, personalized CGI worlds for our clients, where visitors could come in, see behind the scenes of that business or brand, and engage with the people, products, and expertise all under one roof. I got a resounding, that sounds very difficult and probably won't work from the team, but like a good agency owner, I ploughed on regardless. So for us, this probably was the ultimate pivot, and I'm not a big fan of the term pivot because I think it indicates like a temporary change, whereas this was a very strategic move from ourselves because there was clearly a gap in the market. A lot of our clients were stuck and almost paralyzed by the situation they find themselves in, that their main access to lead generation and brand awareness had fallen away overnight, and effectively were sat there waiting to see what happened. Now, that obviously provides an opportunity in the market. I don't know about anybody else on the webinar, but the new normal is a term that's been very frustrating for us. But clients were having to navigate not only virtual events, hybrid events, rapid digital transformation and adoption. And we're looking to the advisors and consultants like ourselves to tell them what the new normal was going to look like, which provided a great opportunity for us to shape the new normal. So it's fair to say the clients were fairly clueless, really, in terms of how they were going to address this gap in their marketing communications mix on brand awareness and lead gen. Now, this is where there was a real opportunity to look at what was already in the marketplace. I don't want to poo-poo webinars too much today, obviously, given we're all on one. But really, when you look to what was available in the marketplace in the virtual event space, webinars were being uplifted into virtual events. And beyond that, it was relatively static, unpersonalized landing pages, very uninspirational in terms of the products and services that were openly available in the marketplace. So, one of my favorite quotes, but if it doesn't exist, you can create it. And that's exactly what we set about doing with Virtual Visitor. So it gave us the opportunity really to embrace a startup mentality, which is something we'd not maybe considered or done for a long time at BDB, given we've been trading for 30 plus years. And we really went for this in terms of it, invested heavily in terms of time, money, and energy, I guess, as well, in terms of bringing the Virtual Visitor product to life. So first of all, we set about obviously defining what our solution was. And when we looked at what was available in the marketplace and thinking back to the physical event space, we wanted something that would enable perpetual brand engagement. So something that was beyond a moment in time or a spike in activity. We wanted to play the trends and play to people's fears around people wanting safe, sustainable, but also successful brand experiences and events. So taking advantage, I guess, of the conditions we found ourselves operating in during the pandemic. We wanted something that was completely integrated. And rather than thinking what you'd lost through having to do virtual meetings, it was more about what you could gain by operating beyond the physical limitations of the real world. Also, many of our clients, when they do exhibit or showcase their products and services at events, have to do so with compromise. They're governed by the floor space they've got, the ceiling height, the depth of the carpets, the waste, the energy, their carbon footprint. Again, in a virtual world, you can bring ridiculously large things to life, or miniaturization, things that you couldn't even see with the naked eye. And you can incorporate and showcase all your products, services, expertise, and people in one space without the compromise you would normally see. Obviously, also in the virtual space, it enables you to deliver a much more personalized experience. And through the virtual visitor platform that we developed, you can effectively, it's almost choose your own adventure. You decide where you go. You are in a CGI world. And I'm conscious it's very difficult to showcase this without showing a video. So that can be shared afterwards through Paul or the team, given the time restrictions we've got today. We also wanted to showcase how easy it was to integrate with existing tech stacks with our clients. And most importantly, as marketing budgets become under more pressure, that the quantifiable return on investment that could deliver as well. We were brave enough to define our own category in Marcom. So just like Drift, we're the first people to kind of talk around conversational marketing, and Showpad to talk about sales enablement. For Virtual Visitor, we want to talk about a brand engagement portal, far beyond a website, a flat, linear, familiar, unpersonalized experience. This is an immersive CGI world where your visitors can come and engage with your products and services in their own time, educate themselves at a pace and a place that suits them on a device of their choosing, and it's always open for them to return to time and time again. And we also wanted to make sure it appealed to the wider stakeholders. So we wanted to effectively address the entire suite of Marcom's objectives within it. So we didn't want to build just a virtual event platform or a webinar platform. We wanted something that enabled the full suite of Marcom's objectives, no matter what it was, to be addressed. So very important for us that it was scalable, flexible, and versatile. A lot of the clients we work with at BDB are large, multinational, billion-pound corporations with deep pockets, but we also wanted to appeal to smaller businesses and companies as well. So we wanted to make sure it wasn't a one-trick pony, that it didn't just do webinars. It can do, but in the same extent, it could work for employee engagement, training, media tours, virtual showrooms we've built in Hong Kong. We've done events in German castles that we've rebuilt. We've done dairy farming training events for one of our large clients where they train farmers in developing nations. You name it, it can be applied to it, and there's a case for it to be applied. And this is all new and emerging technology and cases. I also want just to kind of wrap up, I guess, and run through some of what I consider the key learnings have been for me going back into that startup mentality and embracing the development of a product-based business. And I suppose the starting point for me, number one, would be ignore the naysayers. There's plenty of people who have said it won't work, it's too difficult. and place a lot of doubt in your mind as you go through. But with the right level of resilience and determination, it's amazing how far you can get. That we've now delivered over £1 million of revenue from a standing start, from a product that didn't exist. Profitable revenue as well, so 40, 50, 60% margins on each event that we're running. We've run over 40 events now so far. We've had over 20,000 visitors, and the numbers continue to climb as more and more of our clients and prospects are adopting virtual visitor as their platform of choice. Again, when you go back to your startup mentality, I think there's a tendency to attempt to do everything yourself and try to become a master of all trades. So I found myself suddenly trying to learn CGI and debbing and coding. That certainly isn't my sweet spot. So surrounding yourself with the right talent and the right people and the right advisors is absolutely critical to bring in something like virtual visitor or any product-based business to life at speed. Talking of speed is everything. So I'm not sure about the participants on the webinar, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So it was kind of a change in mentality for me, trying to embrace progress and baby steps forward. And I guess embracing those marginal gains over every aspect of the system and a solutions development being absolutely perfect at release. So embracing more of a test and learn, accepting not everything's going to be optimized and things will go wrong and will need improving over time. And also really embracing that minimal viable product in terms of the MVP status of taking the product to market at different stages of the development, but being extremely clear with the people you're targeting, where the roadmap is leading and what future solutions will be incorporated into the platform. The big thing is to listen carefully to the stakeholder requirements. And by that, I mean, listen to the feedback you get from visitors, listen to the feedback you get from your clients and the people that are running the events, and don't just try and force to the market the solution that you think is fit for purpose. A lot more listening than speaking has been going on for us over the last 12, 18 months as this has been developed. The deep dive research and insights, not only into the competitor market, competitor products, but also working with advisors like Paul and the team and Steve to make sure we're complying with what we need to, keeping the right documentation in play. So yeah, ears have been wide open on this one. We've tried to elevate the conversation. So whilst you've got to embrace the trends and buzzwords, everybody was speaking about, and it continues to, about virtual events, webinars, hybrid events. We've elevated the conversation ultimately towards the core objective of brand awareness and brand engagement. So we've taken the conversation as giving us the ability to control and shape that conversation, both in the content we produce and in the thought leadership we're now delivering in this space to our clients through virtual visitor. We would say there's value in a brand. We're a marketing agency, but just like you have a Starbucks coffee or a certain favorite brand of water, really building a brand around the solution and products has paid real dividends for us, not only positioning us in a premium price point in the marketplace, but also giving people a reason to believe, both from a professional and personal brand perspective. We've won the content war and continue to, as we bombard the market with content of relevance, answering the public's questions, coming to the rescue of our clients, and the three pillars of content we've typically got orientated around being the problems and frustrations they're facing, the fears around what happens to their brand awareness and lead generation during where we are now and into the future, and ultimately what they want to achieve and what their goals are moving into and beyond the new normal. Playing the long game, it would have been easy for us to just push a virtual events platform. We've chosen not to do that because we believe there's longevity in the solution in creating the category of brand engagement portals, but also the future of websites. So as B2B, well, for us B2B, but in the B2C market as well, as the modern buyers and consumer behaviors continue to change and evolve, the demands on social and websites will continue to change as well. And I think that's where more of an immersive brand engagement portal certainly has a part to play. And then finally, ask for help. I think as entrepreneurs and businessmen and women, sometimes we're afraid to ask for help. And I know people like Steve and Paul, particularly on the R&D side of things, are fantastic advisors. And also asking for help when you don't know what you're doing, because if you are trying to operate in a new space, there's an awful lot of learning. So knowing your own limitations and knowing when using your network and inviting those in who can really add value and help you on this journey is a critical part of the process as well. I've gone as fast as I could there, Paul, given I knew we were overrunning.
That was amazing, Matt. I think you've set the bar there in terms of both presenting and presentations, because I really enjoyed the humour of your slideshow. It's fantastic. Thank you. A few questions then. So obviously this is quite a shift in mindset, moving from, you know, having a buoyant agency, sort of very organic, service-based, as you said, always perfecting your work, moving at a certain pace, you know, carefully considered over 30 years, to this being very different. And so how did you move into that mindset of suddenly having to move so fast? Did it help the fact that sort of the rug had been pulled from under your feet a bit with the agency, and so that you were having to swim fast in order to?
I think yes, an interesting question. I think what's been amazing is BDB's continued to grow organically because of the nature of the clients we serve. The sectors that they're in are quite health-based, pharma, life sciences. So they've I don't want to say had a good pandemic, but in the sense of they've continued to spend money during it. So the core business at BDB did well. I think on the exhibitions and events, yeah, certainly having the rug pulled out from underneath you focused the mindset a lot more and gave you a reason to really believe and invest the time. But I think
I sort of see that from two ways, really. Like on one hand, it's almost like the agency could be a distraction. So obviously that's still going to take up a huge lion's share of your energy. But at the same time, you've built the ship, like you've got all these resources, and it's great that you've brought in employee ownership at the same time, because I don't know, obviously, the structure and whether the technology business is within the service business, but all these people are getting to work on this really exciting project at a time when, you know, things were obviously looking quite shaky.
Yeah, and I think that's played a core part in it, Paul, in the sense that the team have been super enthusiastic to work on it, because it genuinely is quite groundbreaking, and it's almost showing up some of the products that have been on the market for so long. So yeah, the team have been super enthusiastic to work on it, but I'd be lying if I didn't say there's been lots of late nights and weekends for people like myself and some of the other leaders of the team running the day job and the night job.
But it sort of forced you to do that, hasn't it? Because if the agency had just continued, you know, if the pandemic hadn't happened and you just continued to be buoyant, realistically, you would have never found the time and the focus to say, going to build this product.
No, I think it's forced you to think innovatively and force you to be a bit braver than you normally would, for sure. Yeah,
brilliant. Right, we've got some other questions from people on. Tobin, amazing story, thanks for sharing. Nice how it's aligned with your. Can you see the questions? I can't remember.
I've not been looking at them, no, so I don't get distracted.
That's all right. Nice how it's aligned with your core business, which again I thought was really smart and really fruitful. Looks like a big product. How did you decide what to invest?
I think it's gone over time and it's continuing to evolve, I would say. So the upfront investment we knew was going to be heavily on time and some financial commitment as well, which was within, I guess, our personal means that we were comfortable with, and you know, having the existing agency, which is a relatively cash-rich agency behind us as well, to kind of fund it. We continue to invest and evolve in it now over time as we introduce new aspects to the system. So I think it's kind of a rolling spend, but also it was interesting what you were saying earlier on the R&D front around clients funding it. So this is very much our product that we've developed for Virtual Visitor, but we are winning client projects in advance of us developing new features, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we wouldn't spin it like that for the taxman, but in the sense of that's in reality is what's happening, that they're almost cash flow funding it in a way that we're winning a project that takes 3 months to deliver, and in that period would embed some new features. And
how much of your £1 million turnover I think you've done to date, how much of that has come from the BDB clients?
Probably 50-50 at the minute. So we've sold it into several of our existing clients who were keen to be brave and be seen to be leading the way in digital transformation. But then as we've started to eke the brand out gently into the marketplace amongst our network, we've had quite a decent uptake as well amongst just new clients and prospects, which we're now picking up more work through BDB as well. So it's really nice to have that kind of cross-pollination. And £1 million worth of work and some pretty impressive projects, what you've explained there, some of the things that you've been able to achieve in such a short space of time. How much of this has been using technology that already exists as opposed to building your own? We've invested heavily in the tech stack of our own, and we've gone out and bought best in class, not only from a CGI perspective, but in terms of bringing skills into the business, obviously, because I can't CGI myself. So we brought in 2 or 3 people who are awesome in that area and have invested a lot in the kit and the software, best in class software. So that's why visually Virtual Visitor looks really good, but it's also we're always keen to stress it's more the return on investment that it can deliver and how it can deliver a tangible impact on the business, which is the main thing to focus on.
But you've not got obsessed and wasted time and energy and resources on building technology from scratch. You've gone and found it, and like you said, got that MVP very quickly, and that's enabled you to take off much faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Tobin also asked, do you have the in-house skills to do it, or did you hire? So it sounds like a bit of both.
We started off working development partners globally. So we had development partners for some of the design overseas in Sweden and Ukraine. But as time's gone on, we wanted to ensure and control the quality of the delivery. So we've in-housed all the expertise. There's nothing outsourced at the minute. The only thing I'd say there is for us to scale it over time and continue to grow it, we're going to need to build like a SaaS partnership model effectively, because we're constantly at capacity.
And John's asked, how do you manage people's time between clients and your products? Do you make the visitor is virtual visitor is just another client, just as important as the others?
Exactly that. Yeah, we treat it as a client, and arguably it's been one of our biggest clients, obviously, this year to an extent. So yeah, we treat it and give it the respect it deserves and run it as a client account with its own dedicated team, and resource capacity and timesheet management and all the rest of it. So yeah.
And which hat do you wear when virtual visitor is getting work from DVD?
I'm still very dedicated to BDB because that's my role and my core role. Virtual visitors, started off as kind of the side hustle and the pivot, but as it's growing, it still pulls my excitement because it's such a cool area as well. I'm no different to a team member. It's very exciting. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the two kind of brands evolve and develop over time.
And Tobin's asked, do you worry about that, the splitting your focus across two ventures, the core business and what he's called the side hustle? But it sounds like it's more excitement than worry for you.
Yeah, I think the excitement pulls you through. So I mean, it's so busy, and there's huge demands on your time. But I genuinely, I've loved it in a way. I've loved it. I've embracing the startup mentality. It felt like going back to the early days, and it's been really refreshing. So yeah, it's been good.
Final question, and I think this is a really good one actually. What kind of advisors added the most value on building the product? So who did you seek support that was most pivotal to the success?
I would say lawyers and accountants, but in the sense of lawyers to an extent of the structuring of how we wanted to get the group set up. We wanted to make sure it was all done on a fair basis. We've also done a lot on the SaaS development, so in terms of the SaaS partnership programs and making sure the legal documentation that's pulled together, because when you were developing things within Virtual Visitor, the IP ownership is very important in terms of where that lies, just not even from a front end, a back end, but all the models we're creating. So I've worked closely with Steve on all those areas. And then going forward now, utilising our advisors to really draw on that partnership model and get people on board with us who can help us grow it out as a business, really. So it's been a real mix of everybody, but then the R&D side of things as well from an accounting perspective, to make sure we were documenting everything the way we need to, and thinking ahead of putting claims in, if that makes sense.
And again, every credit for doing that at such an early stage, because you're just trying to get proof of concept and sell your stuff and get it built, but you're still carving out the time to make sure that you're properly protected so that you don't come undone later.
I think that's the old accountant in me coming out, so yeah.
Oh yeah, I did read that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Anyone else in terms of like people who had maybe, I guess what Toby might also be thinking about, like consultants and people who have maybe been there and done it before, did you get counsel from people who had done something like that?
I spoke to a company called Fourth Hospitality. My wife used to work there years ago, so they were a SaaS-based business in the hospitality market. So some of the directors there were heavily involved in building a SaaS business, which is something that's new to me. So even in terms of the pricing structures, how you'd grow out and develop more of a partnership model. So it kind of had not unpaid, but in terms of advisors and mentors, I guess, along the way that have certainly added a lot of value as well. Yeah, for sure.
You've not just freewheeled this, have you? You've thought carefully and got counsel from lots of different people.
Yeah, I think it's critical, and I think that's why it's working, and that's why hopefully it's got the longevity and value, and that's why it's got a future beyond it being a product that served a purpose during the pandemic. So yeah. Does
it make it harder to stay focused on the agency in reality, because does it feel like the agency is a more difficult business to scale?
Scaling an agency, yeah. I mean, it's this choice of whether you want to scale an agency is another question. So, I mean, we've gone from 30 people to 60 people during the pandemic. Wow. in BDB's numbers. So BDB's transforming as an agency and pushing through those 40, 50, 60 barriers, and it's tough. Everybody will know that who's been there and done it. So that is certainly very busy. Yes, it's mildly easy to scale a SaaS business, definitely, for sure.
So it's that €9 million contract that was retained, was it? I wasn't sure whether you won it and then lost it because of the pandemic.
No, it's coming back now because the events and exhibitions, the physical events and exhibitions are starting to make a return now. So we're still very much on the ticket for it, which is great.
Yeah.
And it was a loss in the sense of it went away, but it didn't disappear. And now we're working on integrating virtual visitor and taking it on the road in a new platform to enable it to be embedded into physical exhibition stands, which is another really cool development as well. So
yeah, cool. Felicity and Ben, do you want to just share your video again? And Matt, if you want to just hide that presentation. Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So those guys come back on. I think I've answered the questions. Still getting a little notification there, but yeah, all those questions are done. Brilliant, guys. Is there any sort of final tips of advice that you want to give our audience, and also how do they get in touch from here?
Do you want to say that, Christina?
Yeah, so I think nothing really to add on tips and advice in terms of getting in touch, either to come through you directly to me, Paul. Be very happy to speak to anyone who's got any queries, anything that they'd like to discuss. We're always very happy to have conversations. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, I think I'd say in relation to the three topics we touched on, the PYE cap, the COVID funding, subsidised issue, I think just have a conversation with us. I think all three issues are in their own right, complexities in there, and I think have a conversation with us. And I think, as Felicity kind of touched on earlier, a bit of forward planning can kind of go a long way. Have that discussion like now rather than after the event, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's much easier to plan around something than it is to retrospectively try and set something up in the way that would have been most efficient.
Yeah, well, I think Matt's reinforced that message really well. Anything from you, Matt? I appreciate it's slightly different because you're not necessarily advising other agencies, but is there anything?
I think more just from an agency owner's perspective, it's, there's opportunities out there during all the change and the risk, and just be brave and go for it, I guess, but surround yourself with the right people who can help you along on the journey. And you can find me and BDB on all the usual channels and virtual visitor, and we'll share the slides and the video as well. So
brilliant. Yeah, so we'll get those out in the next 48 hours, probably Friday, with contact information and the slides from today. So all that's left is say thank you for everyone for giving us your time today, and thank you for our amazing speakers for giving lots of value to our audience, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.